For years, one exam has stood between millions of Nigerian students and higher education. I'm talking about JAMB. The sleepless nights, the tutorials, the pressure, and that constant fear every student knows too well. What if I don't pass? But now, for some students, that reality is quietly shifting. In a major policy change that is already stirring conversation across the country, the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, JAMB, has announced that candidates seeking admission into education programs and non-engineering agriculture-related courses will no longer be required to write the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination, UTME. Yes, no UTME for those categories. The announcement was made during JAMB's ongoing policy meeting on admissions and shared on its official platform, marking one of the most significant shifts in Nigeria's admission process in years. Now, for context, the UTME has always been the main gateway into universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. Every year, millions of students sit for it, competing for limited admission slots. So, naturally, removing that barrier, even for specific courses, is not a small change. Now, according to JAMB, this exemption applies strictly to education programs and agriculture courses outside engineering fields. However, this is not a free pass into university. Students are still expected to meet O-level requirements, go through institutional screenings, and satisfy whatever additional criteria schools may set, including interviews or departmental assessments. So, the structure is changing, but standards are not completely disappearing. Now, here is where it gets even more interesting and honestly more emotional for some students. Because while all of this policy discussion is going on, another major decision has quietly been approved. The Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, alongside stakeholders in the tertiary education sector, has fixed 150 as the minimum cutoff mark for university admission for 2025-2026 admission exercise. Let that sink in. 150. The decision was reached during the annual policy meeting in Abuja, where education leaders agreed on what is called the National Minimum Tolerable UTME score. Now, what this means is simple. No university is allowed to admit any candidates below 150. However, institutions still have the freedom to go higher if they choose. So while 150 is the baseline, some universities may still set 180, 200, or even higher depending on their standards. Now, if we connect everything, you start to see a bigger picture for me. On one hand, JAMB is removing UTME entirely for certain courses like education and agriculture. On the other hand, for courses still under UTME, the minimum benchmark is now 150. And this is where Nigerians are divided, because education and agriculture are not small courses in reality. Education produces the teachers who train every other profession in the country. Agriculture sits at the center of food security, jobs, and economic survival. Yet, over time, these courses have recorded lower application rates compared to medicine, law, pharmacy, and engineering, often because students see them as less competitive or less financially rewarding. And that's the irony, because the very courses that hold the foundation of the society are often the ones people avoid. Now, social media is not keeping quiet about this. One user at Lord Rabbi on X questioned the logic behind the exemption, saying it feels like education is being treated as a lesser discipline. And I want to quote him, "Would genuinely love to know the rationale behind this decision at JAMB headquarters, because it doesn't make sense to reduce the standards for education-related courses, as if to insinuate that the said courses are educationally lower or less than others." Another user on X at Sa Uzo Igwe1 says, "This is a terrible move. In the next 10 years, our educational sector will be weakened more." Then at Taufik182 on X says, "Now I understand why teachers aren't valued in this country. Just look at JAMB, for God's sake. Education programs are now being treated like they don't require standards or competence. Imagine exempting candidates from UTME simply because they want to study education. And tomorrow we will complain about the quality of teachers and the state of our education system." Now, from a student's perspective, at Samiad times on X says, "Is it from the next year? This is really annoying. What about us that are genuinely interested in studying education courses? And we took JAMB. You guys can't just wake up one day and change things like it's just not done." And at Topi Popo says, Just remember that those in education that didn't write JAMB will be the next set of teachers to teach your children. Oh. But not all the reactions were negative though. Some believe this could be a strategic move, one that encourages more students to consider education and agriculture at a time when those sectors desperately need manpower. Still, whether people support it or not, the concerns are valid on all sides because Nigeria doesn't just need doctors and lawyers. It also needs well-trained teachers who can actually teach. It needs agricultural experts who can improve food systems. It needs people who can strengthen the foundation of society, not just compete for prestige courses. And that is why this conversation is bigger than UTME.